Good afternoon, rather.
Yeah.
Um, hello, everyone. My name is Bill Hoefflin. I'm the Senior Program Naturalist at the Wood County Park District. Here today to talk about some of our spring wildflowers. Sorry I am late. Normally I would have joined you for lunch, but we had things happening at work today that were unplanned. So I always like to ask at my programs, does anyone know what the closest Wood County park is to here?
Winter Garden.
Not one of our parks.
Oh, which one? I'm sorry.
Wood County Park.
Oh, Wood County Park.
The community
Wood,
center?
Wood County, the city park.
Nope,
No,
that's
that's the
city parks.
Wow.
Huh?
I'll pick night.
Okay, so night is relatively close and I was there this morning. But there is one
What
that's
about Carter Park?
not our, well, Carter Historic Farm is ours, but Carter Park is not.
The farm.
Yeah.
Wildflowers Museum.
Yeah. Baldwin Woods probably is pretty close, but the closest is actually in Bowling Green. It's just south of the Montessori School. And it's named for the big ecosystem that was here.
Black Swan.
Black Salt Preserve.
Yeah.
Okay, so Black Salt Preserve is on South Maple Street, just north of Gypsy Lane. And it is also the northern end of the Slippery Elm Trail, which is a 13-mile rails to trail. It's blacktop asphalt from Bowling Green all the way down to North Baltimore. It's about 10 feet wide and also gets pretty close to 3 of our other parks. So it gets pretty close to Rudolph Savannah, Rudolph Bike Park, and Cricket Frog Cove down in Signet. So today we're gonna, like I said, talk about some spring ephemerals, which is another name for spring wildflowers. And where we find these are in the woods. So if you're getting out and about this spring, especially April and May, all the flowers are gonna be in the forest. So our forest trails are good to hit. At the end here, I have a list of parks that are pretty good or pretty great for spring wildflowers. As far as these go, these are plants, and what do plants need to live? Water, oxygen, sun. Sun is the big one. These soil, so nutrients.
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide when they're photosynthesizing. Very good. So these plants that are in the forest generally are gonna be knee-high and lower. And early in the spring is dominated by the smaller plants. So we're talking ankle-high plants. So if you're out and about and you're looking, you gotta be looking down. Okay, and if you're going for any kind of photographs, you're big into nature photography, bring a knee pad to get down low, or bring like a ground sheet that you can actually lay out on. Don't be ashamed of taking photos completely laid out. People will wander by and say, "What are you doing?" And say, "I'm taking a picture of this really neat wildflower." And then you get to be a naturalist. You get to encourage them to pay attention to nature. And I've done that. And people are like, "What are you doing? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm perfectly fine. Check out this cool plant." So all these plants are in a race, and they're in a race against the trees of the forest. Because once the trees fully leaf out, the amount of light for photosynthesis goes way down. So they're trying to complete almost their entire growing cycle for the year, their life cycle, if you will, in just a few months. So it is a race. And we're gonna talk about some of the factors on that. Does anyone know what this really pretty flower is on the front? Trillium, yes, this is our state wildflower. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to it on its own. But this is usually one of people's favorites because it's just about the most showy spring wildflower we have. Those blossoms are about 2.5 inches across.
Yeah.
So, covered a lot of this already. Never know what size screen I'm gonna be dealing with. Most of these plants are perennials that come back year after year after year. Some of them can live for decades, individual plants. And we're at the tail end of March and spring wildflower season's already been going on for a month
Oh.
It started with this guy.
Oh.
Skunk cabbage. So this is one of the few plants in North America that is thermogenic, which is a big fancy word for saying it produces its own heat. It can melt snow and ice above it and bloom the last week of February. The plant, the flower itself is this structure right here. This is called the spathe. And then inside is the spadix. And on the spadix, all these little structures right here are actually flower blossoms. So it's a compound flower, sort of like a sunflower. Yeah.
When you come across a wildflower in your presentation that is edible, will you please let us know?
Yes, if I know it's edible, I will let you know. Um, I will also let you know if it's not edible, if I know that it's.
Good idea.
So, in that same vein, one of the questions we get from a fair number of audiences, is that edible? And the snarky naturalist says, you can eat anything once.
You like that?
Yeah.
So those seeds, that's how they spread then?
So this structure, this spadix, each one of these flowers, when it's pollinated, will produce a seed in a compound fruit. It's purple and green. It sort of looks like a really weird pineapple, but it's only about this big. And those seeds are generally spread by rodents. They're fairly substantial. Rodents will grab them and cache them, store them to eat later and then forget about them. But this is one of those plants that have been documented as for living decades, upwards of 200 years. An individual. So the flower comes up, and then about a week or two later, the leaf starts growing, and eventually it'll grow into a rather large leaf, up to about this long and about this wide. And it gets the name skunk cabbage because the leaves are somewhat cabbage-shaped leaves. And if you crush them, what do you think it smells like?
Yeah.
Skunk. The other nickname for this plant, on the eastern seaboard and in the Appalachian Mountains is bearweed. Because black bears hibernate all winter, they're not eating and they're also not releasing their waste. And so they get a poop plug. And they will eat this. It's full of oxalic acid, which is an irritant to the GI tract. And it'll help them clear their system. So plant, it's edible, but it'll burn. And it's gonna put you on the toilet. So it's medicinal is what we call it. This is a plant that likes well-drained wet soil, so it likes to be near groundwater seeps and springs. Also along sandy ditches. So it's not common in Wood County, but it is found at Bradner Preserve. If you've ever been there, front boardwalk that leads from the big parking lot to the nature center, it's right before you hit the bridge part with the railings. It's off to the left and right. We're rebuilding that boardwalk and we're converting a big chunk of it to crushed limestone trail. Because the wood in that wood, the boardwalk in that forest decomposes extremely fast. And it's very damp and shady. So, but if you're ever interested, usually the second weekend of March, I do a skunk cabbage only program and we go right out to it. We hop off the boardwalk and get up close and personal, stick a meat thermometer in there. It is inside of that flower is at least 20 degrees above air temperature, unless the air temperature is already like 60 degrees. But inside of there on a cold night where it gets down to -10, it can be 45 degrees in there.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So it has the same metabolic, not impact, but capability as a small rodent. So think of a house mouse. It produces as much heat as a house mouse can.
I grew up going to Oak Albany's and it was loaded with
yes.
skunk cabbage.
Yes, it is.
The whole, I mean, that was my region, so,
Yep.
yeah.
If you're looking for information more than what you're gonna get here, if you go online, the Vision of Wildlife has a bunch of free guides that they're in PDF format, so you can download them to your computer or phone. This one came out, I think about 6, 7 years ago. And it has about 70 of the spring wildflowers that are fairly common in Ohio. They used to print out these guides and you can find them at state park nature centers. And since COVID, they've really stopped doing that. They've gone to more digital, which I don't like because I like to just flip through things out in the field. Okay.
You don't have a cure.
I don't.
Okay,
So
where do
if you,
go?
the big thing would be Ohio and then spring wildflowers of Ohio. And it's gonna be one of your Google results. And like I said, it'll be a PDF.
Okay,
The annoying thing about State of Ohio is they title all of their computer files pub and then usually a 4-digit number. So this is like pub 1542 or something like that. Instead of actually titling it something that a Google search would hit on easily. And then different section of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves has a spring checklist, spring wildflower checklist. And this is half of page 1. They have 200 species listed.
yeah, that's
But
cool.
they are categorized by bloom color, which is really nice. But it requires you to have a field guide or know what the flowers are. This is for the real big nature nerds. If you know any birders that keep a birding checklist, this is sort of the wildflower equivalent. All right, one of my favorites, and it's blue. I meant to check yesterday and I ran out of time. It's probably blooming right now. Where in our parks I know it is Sawyer Quarry up in Perrysburg.
Yeah,
And this is hepatica. There's debate on if there's multiple species of hepatica or just sort of different forms. But the blooms can be anywhere from white to this amazing periwinkle. On a cloudy day, the petals look like light is coming from inside of them, like they're glowing. Like these are not Photoshopped. They've not been touched up. This is how they look. Real diminutive plant, literally the blooms are about 3 inches off the ground. That's it, and the blossoms are at most an inch across. So they are easy to miss, and they like to be extremely dry. So they're gonna be on a slope or somewhere really sandy, or at the base of a really large tree. They get their name because the leaves are 3-lobed. And we're gonna run into this a little bit more in the presentation. Early botanists / naturalists, when they saw things that reminded them of other shapes they knew, they just winged a name at it. Some early naturalists thought that leaf reminded them of a liver, because livers have 3 lobes. I don't see it. And it's funny because, science wasn't really as sciencey back then. Anything that looked like a human organ was considered a medicinal resource to help treat ailments of that human organ. So people would try to make medicine out of this. It doesn't do anything.
what's the longevity of the bloom?
So this one does persist. An individual bloom's gonna last about a week. The plant itself will bloom for about 2 to 3 weeks. So we're probably getting towards the tail end of hepatica. But if you start walking, nature walking in a forest in Northwest Ohio, for the next 8 weeks, you should see something new every week, which is pretty cool. This is one of our most common. It's one of our earliest. This is Spring Beauty. And we have extreme close-ups here. The bloom itself is about 3/4 of an inch across and the plant stands about yay tall. Each individual has 2 leaves and that's it. They can have multiple flowers. The leaves are semi-succulent, meaning they're a bit thick. And if you feel them, they sort of feel like a rubber worm. But one of the things we're gonna see a lot on these close-ups, we'll see lines on the petals. Most of those lines reflect in the UV spectrum. We can't see it, But to insects, they are landing lights at an airport on a runway. And they're guiding the insect right to the center of the flower. Bumblebees, a lot of our solitary bees, a lot of our flies can see in the UV spectrum. So this looks white and pink to us. It might look white and neon yellow or neon purple to them. They might be able to see it way far away compared to what we can see it. These will fade as the blooms get older, they lose those pink stripes. And they fade to white. Anytime you're seeing white or pink spring wildflowers, if you're trying to figure out what exactly it is, if you don't find it in one of those two sections, go to the other. Because some flowers fade from white to pink, some go from pink to white.
What family does that belong to?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be in its own. Like with there's couple other species of spring beauty found in the eastern United States. This is our common. This is also an early one, usually blooming either slightly before or during spring beauty. Notice on spring beauty, we have 5 petals. On this one, we have 4. Cut leaf toothwort is quite a mouthful. Gets its name from its leaves. It is in the mustard family and it is edible. So every part of this plant can be used for food. I've heard it's spicy. I don't know how spicy. I've never tried it.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
can you tell us if there's any of these wild flowers that deer will not eat?
they won't eat the skunk cabbage, but unless you have a groundwater seed, if I know any that are super resistant, I'll make mention of it. I will say
Thank
that
you.
spring beauty is one of the most tenacious and persistent spring wildflowers we have. There are still people that are in their lawns of their houses that were built 100 years ago. If they've never applied a broadleaf herbicide, they still can have spring beauty growing up in their lawn. Yeah. So these are extremely persistent unless you use herbicide, and then they're gone. Cut leaf toothwort, when we're in early spring, March, it's gonna be short. But this is one of our longer bloomers. It'll bloom all the way through April. And by the end of April, some of the plants are almost this tall.
They're
So-
a shade plant, right?
Oh,
Are they a shade?
so that's the tough thing with all of these plants. They want full spring sun. They don't want anything to do with full summer sun. So if you're ever trying to sort of create a garden effect out of them, you got to pick those places that either have deciduous trees right overhead or sort of the north or east flower beds around buildings, because those only get partial sunlight. When these first come up, it's leaves only, and sometimes when we're out and nature walks with adults, they'll see the leaf and they're like, "Oh, someone's planted marijuana in your park." And I'm like, that's not what marijuana looks like. We don't have a problem with secret grow operations here in the county. Okay? So it's not at all related to marijuana or hemp. It's in the mustard family and it's not a problem. But
That's
people
too
that
funny.
aren't quite in the know get alarmed. This is one that should be blooming starting next week. Bloodroot. This is in the poppy family. And it does have a medicinal chemical in its roots and its sap. And I can't remember the name of it. And I don't remember what it's used for, but there is a medicinal quality to this plant, not an edible quality. It is characterized by 8 petals. 4 of them are identical to each other, and then the other 4 are identical. So it has this cool symmetry to it. But each individual flower will bloom for 24 hours or less, and then it'll drop its petal. So they get pollinated very quickly, and then they drop their petals. so that they're not gonna be bothered by any kind of herbivores looking to eat petals. And they have this single stem. Usually the leaf comes up and it's all curled up and the flower stem or stalk is inside of it. And the leaf will open a little bit and the flower will come up and blossom and then the leaf will fully open. Um, like I said, the petals drop quickly. It starts producing a little seed pod. We'll talk about that in a second, but the leaf will continue to grow. One, to help produce the seeds, but two, to increase the root stock of this plant. This plant can spread by rhizome. And that means sending out a horizontal root and popping up a new leaf and or flower. It's basically a clone of itself. We're going to talk about that with one of the other plants that spends more energy cloning itself than actually producing seeds.
So that can be invasive in your garden.
Yeah.
This one won't ever be invasive. This one's well behaved. There is one that could be invasive, but you gotta remember with these that they're all fairly soft and ephemeral or short-lived. So if you don't like them there, they're not hard to get rid of at all. You can rip them out really easily. The leaves themselves by the end of May are sometimes this far across. They get rather large. Another one that spreads by rhizome. This one's in the lily family, and with lilies, almost always you're going to see groups of three. And this one has three sepals. That's these petal-looking structures. These were actually protecting the petals themselves. So this is what covers the petals before the flower opens. So you have three petals, three sepals, only two leaves. And they get their name because the leaves themselves look like the side of a trout. If you've ever seen a brook trout or I'm missing one of the trouts. Rainbow trout. Yes. So they have this mottled appearance. They top out about like this high with the blossom. The plant itself, like we said, spreads by rhizome and it pop up individual leaves everywhere. This one can be aggressive. But like I said, it's not too difficult to control it. It's nowhere near as aggressive as Lily of the Valley, which is atrociously aggressive. Yes. This is a good alternative to Lily of the Valley.
Yeah.
It generally will grow where Lily of the Valley will also grow. The issue with all these spring ephemerals and trying to bring them home is that most of them produce seeds in pods. And the pods open as soon as it is ripe because it doesn't want to hold those seeds up in the air for an herbivore to come eat. And the seeds drop to the forest floor and you can't find them. And sometimes some of these plants go one step further. The seed will have a little fleshy structure on it that's coated in sugar. And the ants grab it and they grab the whole seed and they carry it back to their ant hill and it won't go down the hole. And so they just leave it next to the hole and they eat all the sugar off of it. And now they've planted a new flower because it's in fresh soil with no weed competition. It's pretty well drained because it's mounded up. And if it's sunny enough, it'll germinate right there and start growing. So ants spread a lot of these seeds. And they get a sugary reward for doing it. So we have two species here in Northwest Ohio. We have the white trout lily and the yellow. At Sawyer Quarry, we have the yellow, same with WW Knight. If you want to see them both, the one park that we know that has both is Otsego Park. And you park in the parking lot, walk next to the playground equipment down the hill. And on both sides of you on the slope are spring wildflowers. You get to the bottom of the hill and you've pretty much seen everything there is to see. Just turn around and come back up. Okay, it's literally a 15-minute walk and you get a little hill exercise. If you're feeling very like I need more workout, you can curve around once you hit the river and walk parallel to the river back to the big building, the stone hall. And then if you're a real glutton for punishment, you can go up the stairs that are behind it. And I say glutton for punishment because whoever developed those stairs, for some reason, made the rise on them about like this. So it's like, and it's twice as many stairs as you need. And it's really frustrating.
It's for
old
just people
people
that
that
have
have
shortness.
People that, I don't know, like bad hips. Yeah, so. But on that floodplain, there's not a lot to see because it does get hammered by the Maumee River. So these guys aren't strong enough to persist there. We do have some wildflowers down on the floodplain, but they're non-natives. They're slightly invasive species. All right, another mustard family. So how many petals do you see? 4. So if you see 4 petals, your first guess should be mustard family. It's very well represented in our spring wildflowers. Probably about the 3rd largest group. This is purple cress. We also have early spring cress, and there's a 3rd type of cress. They all look dang near identical. And you almost gotta be a field expert to tell the 3 apart.
So the mustard family, is it edible?
Yes. Yep, this one's edible. All of them range from white to lavender to purple, all 3 species that we find here in Northwest Ohio. This is generally the deepest of the purples, but you can find these with old blossoms that'll have faded almost to white or lavender. And they stand about 10 inches high. They're generalists, so any of our woods is a possibility for them. They are one, like a lot of our spring ephemerals, by the time you get to the end of June, you won't even find leaves anymore. They're completely gone. And scientists think that that's a adaptation to reduce risks of injury and mortality. Because if you keep your green parts up and they're not getting much energy, not much photosynthesis, 1, that's not worth it. 2, all of that material, all that plant material is subject to viruses, germs, fungus that can get down to the rootstock and kill the plant. So if you just die back and go dormant and hibernate, you're less likely to have an adverse effect. And one of my favorites, when I ask kids what breeches are, they have no idea. What are breeches? Good, yes. And these were named because the first naturalists that saw them, it reminded them of the pants that Dutch sailors wore, Dutchman's breeches. This is a clumping perennial. I don't know about edibility. I don't see anything ever eat it. Like when you find one in the wild, they look pristine. So I'm guessing they're not edible. But they have this parsley shaped leaf. There is another member that's in the same family called squirrel corn that has a similar shaped leaf, but instead of being wide open, like it's hanging on a clothesline, the 2 legs are side by side. Sort of reminds you of a bleeding heart flower if you've seen those. But squirrel corn is also white. The only ones that I know of are at Bradner Preserve. We used to have a couple clumps at Sawyer and they disappeared. I don't know if they died off, or one thing that we do deal with is plant poaching. People come in, dig them out, take them home. But a real cool one, Bradner is one of the top spring wildflower parks. Sawyer and then Cedar Creeks are probably the top 3 of our park system. This is usually a crowd favorite. It's usually blooming by the 2nd week of April. This is toadshade trillium. Sometimes it's just called toadshade. So if anyone says, hey, look at that toadshade, this is what they're talking about. Trillium, well named, 3 leaves, 3 sepals, 3 petals. They can be variegated, so this mottly pattern, sometimes the variegation is not very noticeable or non-existent. There's variability. So Mother Nature doesn't use a cookie cutter as much as we think she does. Everything is a little bit different from everything else. This one I've seen persist in a little bit heavier deer populations than the large flower trillium, the big white one. But all of the trilliums are basically candied deer. So if you're trying to grow trilliums, you want to keep them as close to your house as you can, where the deer are less likely to come.
Yeah.
That's right up to my door.
Do you see a lot of these? Cause I haven't.
So Sawyer Quarry is our biggest park for toad shade, followed by Bradner second. But
Okay,
outside of those two, I don't see it much.
okay, I was gonna say, I've not seen it, so it's,
It's possible that they're one of the species that like, soils with more calcium in them.
oh,
And Sawyer Quarry sits on a limestone bedrock, so it's pretty, calcareous. This is one everyone is probably familiar with, and I wanna mention that, it is a wildflower, I mean, it does persist in our lawns. The flowers are edible. If you have them in your lawn and you don't use lawn chemicals, you can go out and pluck a bunch of these and throw them in a salad. And it adds the prettiness, and then at the base of each flower, there's a little pocket of, nectar. So, and when you eat the salad, you get a little hit of sugar, of sweetness. There are at least 31 species of violets in Ohio. Common blue violet is the one you're most likely to find in your lawn. It is also one of the most common in the woods. And the reason it persists in your lawn, it is a perennial, but each individual, doesn't live for decades. This plant reproduces sexually through its flowers, pollen and an ovum. So two different genetic contributors. But at the base of the plant, near the soil level, it will also produce seed-like structures that are clones of itself. And just like with the trout lilies, the little seed pod is covered in sugar and the ants take it somewhere else in your lawn. So if you've ever wondered why you continue to have violets in your yard year after year after year, you can mow these over twice a week all summer long. It's still reproducing below your mower blades and you can't get it. So that's why they are so persistent in your yard if you don't use herbicides. I think they're fantastic. Our violets range from deep purple, to lavender, to white, to
Yellow,
yellow.
yeah,
We have yellow violets in Ohio.
yeah.
Okay, big clue on violets. All of them are 5-petaled, 2 above, 3 below, and the center one is usually a little bit more substantial in width and will be fairly heavily striped. If you've ever grown violas at your house, it's the same genus of plant. They're literally cousins to one another. Almost all of them have heart-shaped leaves, but not all. There are some that have some pretty funky leaves that look like fingers. We see some of those at Rudolph Savannah. I think that's Baxter's violet.
What color is it?
It is a lavender in color. Rue anemone gets its name from its leaf shape. It looks like a rue leaf. It's not a true rue. It's in its own group of plants, and it typically starts as white and fades to pink. And this is a fairly diminutive plant, tops out about this high, but it does tend to form patches. It sends out little rhizomes, but it's not aggressive. So like starts as one individual. The biggest patch I've seen is probably about like this. We have a ton of it at Sawyer Quarry, right next to the trail. You can see it really easy. It is one of the sort of mass flowers, like it makes a big impact when it's present. Whereas some of these other ones, the Dutchman's breeches will just be a little clump of it here or there. Usually when you find rue anemone, you'll find a bunch of it. One of my favorites and important nectar source for our native pollinators is waterleaf. There are at least 10 species in Ohio. The one I learned and most familiar with is Virginia waterleaf. Gets its name from those variegated, the different colors on the leaves. It looks like it's been water spotted. Yeah, if you've ever washed a car and let it dry in the sun, you get water spots. The leaves sort of look like that. Very prodigious bloomer, lots of blossoms, lots of nectar, lots of pollen. If you enjoy apples, pears, cherries, peaches, tomatoes, anything in the squash family, anything in the melon family, those are generally plants that are not pollinated by honeybees, are not efficiently pollinated by honeybees. Honeybees aren't native to North America. They were brought over to help facilitate the pollination of crops that also came from Europe and Asia. Apples are native to North America, native to other places as well, but like our turkey bits and our melons, a lot of them are from South America. And they co-evolved with native pollinators, including the ones in North America. And this is an early source of energy for those pollinators. So it helps those pollinators make it long enough. They're fed to pollinate the crops of things that we like to eat. So they're a support system.
Have you noticed, with our weather changes, have you noticed a decrease in a lot of these or a modification or?
So last year, if you remember, if you're a weather person, we had a long persisting winter and then a cold and wet spring. These plants have sort of divvied up the springtime. So we're going through when they bloom sort of chronologically. And each species blooms for about 3 to 4 weeks at the most, because there is a limited number of pollinators right now. Very few insects overwinter as adults. So they're sharing a resource. And if they all bloom at once, the likelihood that they get pollinated with the correct pollen goes down. Last spring, it was so wet and cold all the way through mid-April that everything was delayed by 3 to 4 weeks. And then we get to the last week of April and the first 2 weeks of May, and the woods was insane with blossoms. And it was fun to see, but ecologically it's not great. So the increase in variability to the weather is likely to have some impacts on the success of these guys reproducing. But with them all being perennials, any 1 year is not a big deal. Because they just need to make more of themselves over their entire lifetime, which can be years to decades. But if the pattern shifts significantly, and persists that way, there could be trouble. Large flowered bellwort has a couple lookalikes. There's 2 other species of bellwort. This is the biggest, and by that I mean it stands about that tall. And the blossoms always open down. Most of the photos you will see are like this because it's very hard to get underneath and photograph them. I've tried, when digital cameras first came out, I was working at Toledo Metro Parks. And I really tried to get some photos of trout lilies that opened down. And it was a cloudy sky and the whole sky just blew out the entire photo. It was garbage. And I'm like, all right, I'm done now.
Are these along riverbanks or wet areas or where are sand or where?
So they like well-drained areas.
Well-drained.
Yeah, and
Okay.
well-drained can mean a couple different things. It can be the soil texture like sandy, or it can be slope. So you can find these in areas that have slopes. They're at Sawyer Quarry along the trail. We see them every year. There's another flower that looks fairly similar. The blooms are a little bit different. We have wild oats also at Sawyer. They bloom later, like in the late May. And by that time, I'm done with my spring wildflower walks. Because now we're in field trip season. So I have lots of kids and no time for the fun walks.
So this is late May.
This is mid to late May for this one.
Okay.
They can be a little earlier if they're high and dry. We haven't talked about that. Let's talk about it with this one. What really starts off the bloom season is temperature, and it's both air temperature and ground temperature. Ground has probably the bigger impact because these plants are all growing off of their roots and the roots are underground. Where you see the earliest blooms are the lighter soils, the well-drained soils. They're soils on slopes that face south or west, because that's the strongest sun is south and west. And at the base of large trees, if you think about a tree trunk, is it white? No, they're gray or brown, right? So they stand out in this bright sun we're having today, and the trunk warms up, absorbs sunlight and heats up. And if you know about heat and cold, heat always goes to cold. So that trunk acts like a radiator, solar collector, and it shunts warmth to the soil. So the earliest spring blooms will be at the bases of big trees. It also helps that the roots usually, as the tree grows, it sort of humps the ground up and creates a slope for drainage. And in some woods that have been around for decades, sometimes you'll find a ring of flowers and no tree because the tree had fallen down and decomposed away and then left the flowers behind, which is pretty amazing. Wild geranium, this is solidly into about the first week of May. These can get up to knee high and they do form clumps.
And they stink.
They're a little,
And they're evasive.
they can be a little bit aggressive. I don't know if I call them invasive.
I've been trying to get rid of mine for over 3 years now.
Oh, my goodness.
They're just now starting to peek through the ground, going through the holes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
5 petals, all the same shape. They can range from sort of a medium purple to lavender. And then occasionally you run into pink ones. And even more rare, I've seen all white ones. There's one time, there's a huge patch at Pearson Metro Park on the Orange Trail. And by huge, I mean almost the length of this room and 10 feet wide. And it was all the purple and there were 2 pinks and 1 white. So hundreds of blossoms and just 2 pink, 1 white. So there's some variability, not a lot. All right, this is one, if you walk in the woods in May and seen a big heart-shaped leaf, you've walked right by it and you've not even noticed the blossoms. Because all the blossoms lie on the ground, underneath the leaves. All of these are blooming right now. In this photo, I should say. They are generally mostly fly pollinated, and the type of fly are the flesh flies, the ones that like to eat and lay eggs on roadkill. The flowers attract them. Whatever component it is, we can't smell, but the flies can. And they're additionally pollinated a little bit by ants, and the seeds are taken away by ants. They're another one that have a little fleshy projection on them, covered in sugar. And this guy's got the example of what I've been saying rhizome today. It's these horizontal roots that pop up new individuals. You can cut this rhizome anywhere in here and separate these plants and plant them. But they are clones of one another. That is all genetically the same plant. So this one does form clumps and it does spread. I planted one beneath my picture or my bedroom window that faces north 10 years ago, and I planted 6 in a space like this. And in like 12 years, it's only gotten about this big. They're not super aggressive spreaders, but they are persistent.
Are they edible?
So the roots are a ginger substitute. It's not in the same family as the ginger you find in Asia, but it does have some of the similar flavor profile. From everything I've read, people are like, it's a stretch to call it ginger. It has some spiciness to it, but it's not the same as wild ginger. All right, this is our showstopper. When you find this, you can't miss it. There are a few places in Northwest Ohio where you can find big patches of it. The one public place that I know of is Nature Trails Park in Northwood. It's on Curtis Road, almost in Lucas County. And it has a 1 mile exercise trail through and around the woods. and certain patches of the woods look like that top photo when they're blooming. The other place is not public, but Otterbein Portage Valley on Pemberville Road, north of Pemberville. Their woods has sections that look like that, and they have a trail through there for their residents. This is one that starts blooming white and will fade to pink and then to magenta. And that's probably in response to it being pollinated. Once pollination occurs and the seeds start forming, the whole chemistry of the flower head changes. And it's basically letting the petals go. So it's not supplying them with what they need anymore. So that's sort of a scream of distress by the petals. It's not a big deal, the plant is fine. This is a lollipop to deer. So if you have a bunch of deer in your woods, you're not gonna see a ton of trillium. They eat these things like crazy. And you can order roots from propagators. Finding seeds is extremely hard. The roots have to be harvested when the plant is dormant, so after July. And they should be planted as early in the spring as possible, or even better in the fall. This is one you never want to pick as a pretty flower. Like the shock of it losing its stem or its leaves is sometimes enough to kill the root.
Ooh.
Yes. On average, it takes a large flower trillium 7 years from germination to its first blossom.
Wow.
In really good conditions, it's 2 to 4 years, but in average conditions, it's 7 years for its first blossom. This is our state wildflower, by the way. Designated, I think, in 96. Does anyone know what our state flower is?
Carnation.
Red carnation, scarlet carnation. That was in a response to support the floral industry in Ohio, by the way. Does anyone know what our state drink is?
Tomato juice.
Yes, the same story. Support our truck crop farmers. All right, this might be about the end. Nope, that'll be the end. This is May apple. So big umbrella shaped leaves. When the plant's young, it just sends up one leaf. When it's got a good healthy rootstock and it's ready to reproduce, it'll send up one stem and it'll split into 2 leaves. And where the split is, the flower will bloom. Fairly substantial, about 2 inches across, very succulent leaves, almost no pollen and 0 nectar. This is the plant that spends more energy spreading by rhizome than it does by producing seeds. Inevitably, it does usually get pollinated, and it'll produce a fruit about this big, looks sort of vaguely apple shaped, and it'll ripen at the end of July. And at that point, the plant starts to die back, and the whole plant sort of leans over, and it puts the apple near ground level where its favorite seed disperser lives. This plant loves to have its seeds spread by the eastern box turtle. Eastern box turtle will eat the fruit and the seeds go to the stomach. There's no teeth to crunch them up, go through the guts, and then the turtle at some point later is gonna go and poop them out. Usually it won't be in the same area where it ate the fruit.
How do they do that?
So if you ever see mayapple, chances are it got there via a box turtle at some point. They are a species that is so much lower in population in Northwest Ohio than it was historically. It's very rare to see them anymore. They are still out there. But this big patch might be one individual mayapple. That's how much they spend their energy into cloning themselves. So that genetically might be the same plant, all of that. Who said Jack in the Pulpit?
Jack in the Pulpit.
Okay. Beautiful plant, starts out early in the spring, the blooms, the plants are about this high. In rich sites by mid to end May, I've seen Jack in the Pulpit's leaves this tall, mid-thigh. They can get big. And they are related to our first plant, the skunk cabbage. They're in the same family, the heirloom family. They have a spathe and a spadix. And this is a funny one, because when they're young, when they're, just getting started, they'll just send up a leaf, one leaf. And they get a little bit better root stock, root resources, they'll send up two leaves. And after that, they'll send up a flower. And early in its life, it'll be a male flower. It'll just be a pollen source. And as that plant matures over the years and gets a better root stock, it'll send up a female flower, and when it's pollinated, it'll make a spike of red berries.
Oh, really?
So starts life as Jack in the pulpit. It usually ends life as a Jill in the pulpit.
Is it edible?
No. So just like the skunk cabbage, this one's full of oxalic acid. The fun thing was native braves, Native Americans, young males. One of the challenges they used to do is they'd rip one of these out of the ground, clean off the root, and then split it in half and tuck it in their lip like a wad of chewing tobacco, and then start running. And see who could run the longest without spitting it out, because that acid burns your gums. We know young male humans are not smart, regardless of race. So we just know they do goofy things. So top 6 of our parks for spring wildflowers are up here. I always recommend a walk at Sawyer Quarry on the gravel trail. It's 0.3 miles. It's all level. It's a great park. WW Night has some in the woodlands, the natural play area. I put it up here just because everyone likes to go to WW Night. At Seagull Park, we talked about that short down and uphill walk. That's a great one to hit. Rudolph Savannah, you park in a grassy parking lot and you walk about a quarter mile down to the Slippery Elm Trail, and through that woods where that park is. Great spring wildflowers all right next to the trail. Cedar Creek's one of my favorites. It is the Upper Woods Trail. It's you get into the woods, you go uphill, flatten out, and then come back down and walk along the creek. It's another short trail. That is the short trail in the park, and it is the best spring wildflower trail. You don't need to walk the big 3/4 of a mile loop. There's not a lot to see on that part because it's floodplain. Cedar Creek's great, higher and drier. And then Bradner Preserve, same thing. It's the trail closest to the nature center. If you get onto the big boardwalk on the west side, there's not a lot to see there. It's too wet for these guys. So,
What are the rules as far as staying on the trail?
so if you want to get off and look, the rule is you can't leave behind an impact.
Right.
So that is a judgment call. So tread lightly, but you can go look at stuff, yeah.